I lived a life that looked like a magazine cover. I was 45 years old. I lived in a sprawling white villa with a view of the ocean. I drove a convertible. I hosted dinner parties where we drank wine that cost more than a bicycle. I was married to Richard. Richard was a wealthy architect. He was charming, successful, and 15 years older than me. When we met, I was a struggling artist. He swept me off my feet. He said, "Joan, put down your paintbrush. Let me take care of you. You will never have to worry about money again." So I did. I stopped painting. I became Mrs. Richard Vance. My job was to make his life beautiful. I decorated the villa. I organized his schedule. I was the stepmother to his 2 adult children, Claire and David, who visited on holidays. They smiled at me, ate my food, and called me Joan. I thought we were a family. I thought the villa was our home. I thought the money in the bank was our security. I was happy. I was comfortable. I was blind. It happened on a Tuesday. Richard was complaining of a headache. He sat down in his favorite leather armchair to rest. "I'll bring you some tea," I said, kissing his forehead. When I came back 5 minutes later with the tea, he was gone. A massive heart attack, just like that. The silence in the room was deafening. I cried for 3 days. I was heartbroken. I loved him. I wasn't crying for the money. I was crying for the man. On the 4th day, the tears were still fresh, but the doorbell rang. It was not a friend with flowers. It was Claire, Richard's daughter. And behind her was a man in a suit. A lawyer. Claire didn't hug me. She didn't ask how I was. She walked into the living room, my living room, and looked around like she was inspecting a hotel room. "Hello, Joan," she said coldly. "Claire," I said, wiping my eyes. "Thank you for coming. The funeral arrangements are—" "We are not here for the funeral arrangements," Claire interrupted. She sat on the sofa. "We are here to discuss the estate." The lawyer opened his briefcase. He pulled out a document. "Joan," the lawyer said, "Richard never updated his will after he married you. The house, the investments, the cars, they are all in a trust for his children. The prenuptial agreement you signed states that in the event of death, you receive a small stipend for 1 year." I stared at him. The words didn't make sense. "But this is my house. I chose these curtains. I planted that garden." Claire stood up. She picked up a vase from the table. "Actually, this is my father's house, and now it is mine." She looked me in the eye. "You have 2 weeks to vacate the property, Joan. We are selling it." I felt the floor disappear under my feet. "Would you like to continue the story?" "Of course. Let us continue Joan's story. Here is the second part." 2 weeks?" I repeated. My voice sounded thin and weak. "But where will I go?" "That is not our concern, Joan," Claire said. She stood up and smoothed her skirt. "You received a monthly allowance for 15 years. I assume you saved some of it." I felt a cold sweat on my back. I hadn't saved it. I had spent it. I spent it on the house, on dinner parties for Richard's clients, on gifts for them, Claire and David. I thought the money was a river that would never run dry. I didn't know it was a faucet that someone could turn off. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Please hand over the keys to the Mercedes, Mrs. Vance. The car is registered to the company." I reached into my purse. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the keys. The lawyer picked them up. "And the credit cards," he added. "They have been frozen as of this morning." I handed over the plastic cards. Black, gold, platinum. They were just pieces of plastic now. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in a nightmare. I packed my things while Claire watched me like a hawk. She stood in the doorway with a clipboard. I went to the wall to take down a painting. It was a seascape. I had painted it myself 10 years ago. It was the only time I had picked up a brush since marrying Richard. "Leave that," Claire said sharply. I painted this, I said, my voice trembling. It is mine. It was painted on canvas bought with my father's money, in a studio paid for by my father, Claire said. It belongs to the estate. It adds value to the house for the sale. I looked at the painting. I looked at Claire. I realized she didn't just want the money. She wanted to erase me. She hated that I had taken her father's attention. Now she was taking everything back. I left the painting on the wall. I called my friends, the women I had lunch with every Tuesday, the women who drank my expensive wine and complimented my shoes. Linda, I cried into the phone. It's terrible. They are kicking me out. Oh, Joan, that is dreadful, Linda said. Her voice was distant. Listen, I can't talk right now. We are going to the Hamptons. Let's do lunch. Sometime? She never called back. Neither did Susan. Neither did Mary. I realized then that I didn't have friends. Richard had friends. I was just the wife. Without the villa, without the husband, without the status, I was invisible to them. On the last day, I stood in the marble hallway with 2 suitcases. That was it. 15 years of marriage reduced to 2 bags of clothes and a toiletry kit. The taxi honked outside. Not a limo. A yellow taxi. I walked out the front door. I didn't look back at the ocean view. It wasn't my view anymore. I told the driver to take me to a motel on the other side of town. It was a cheap place. The sign buzzed and flickered. Vacancy. I checked into a small room that smelled of old cigarettes and lemon cleaner. I sat on the lumpy bed. I opened my purse and counted my cash. $300. The lawyer had given me a check for the stipend. It was $5,000. That was supposed to last me a year. After that, 0. I was 45. I had no job. I had a gap of 15 years on my resume. My last job was struggling artist. Who hires a 45-year-old former trophy wife? I walked to the small mirror above the sink. I looked at my reflection. My hair was perfectly colored. My skin was smooth from expensive creams. My nails were manicured. You look expensive, I whispered to the mirror. But you are worthless. I felt a surge of anger. Not at Claire. Not at Richard. But at myself. I had traded my independence for comfort. I had traded my art for security. I had let myself become a pet. And now, the owner was gone, and the pet was out on the street. I washed my face. I scrubbed off the expensive makeup. I took off the diamond earrings, the only things I managed to hide in my pocket. Joan, I said, you have been asleep for 15 years. Wake up. I needed a job, any job. The next morning I put on my simplest dress, which was still silk, and went out. I walked into a coffee shop. Help wanted, the sign said. I walked to the counter. The manager was a young girl, maybe 20 years old. Can I help you? She asked, looking at my designer bag. I would like to apply for the job, I said. The girl laughed. She thought I was joking. You. Lady, these shoes cost more than I make in a month. You don't want to wipe tables. I do, I said. I really do. Do you have experience? She asked. Can you work the espresso machine? Can you use the POS system? I can learn, I said. Sorry, she said. We need someone fast. Try the boutique down the street. I tried the boutique. I tried the flower shop. I tried the office building. No experience. Overqualified. Underqualified. By 5 p.m., my feet were blistered in my heels. I was hungry. I sat on a bench in the park. I watched a woman painting on a canvas near the fountain. She was messy. She had paint on her nose. She was wearing old jeans. She looked tired, but she looked free. I walked over to her. I looked at her painting. It was a portrait of a dog. It wasn't very good. The proportions were wrong. Nice dog, I said. Thanks, the woman sighed. The owner is paying me $50 for it. I need the money for rent, but I just can't get the eyes right. I looked at the canvas. My hands twitched. It had been 15 years, but the knowledge was still there in my muscles. May I? I asked. The woman looked surprised. She handed me the brush. I dipped the brush in the white paint, then a tiny bit of blue. I touched the canvas. Swish. Dab. The feeling was electric. It was like breathing oxygen after holding my breath for a decade. In 3 strokes, the dog's eyes came alive. They looked wet and shiny. Wow, the woman said. You are amazing. Are you a professional? I froze. Was I? I used to be. Then I became a wife. Then I became a widow. Then I became a homeless woman in a motel. I used to be, I said softly. I have 3 more commissions, the woman said, but I'm slow. If you help me, we can split the money. 50-50? $25. It was less than I used to tip the waiter at lunch, but it was money I would earn with my own hands. My name is Joan, I said, holding out my hand. I'm Sarah, she smiled. Grab a brush, Joan. I didn't know it then, but standing in that park, with paint on my silk dress, I was starting to buy back my soul. But the road from a motel room to a real life is long, and I was about to face a humiliation I never expected. Painting with Sarah was good for my soul, but it was bad for my wallet. We painted dogs, cats, and even a parrot. I earned $50 that week. The motel cost $300. The math didn't work. I needed a real paycheck, fast. I found an agency that hired catering staff for events. They didn't care about my resume. They only checked if I had 2 hands and black shoes. Wear a white shirt and black trousers, the manager told me. Be there at 6 p.m. Don't speak to the guests unless they speak to you. I bought a cheap white shirt from a thrift store. I tied my hair back. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like Mrs. Vance anymore. I looked like the help. The address for the event was the City Art Museum. My stomach dropped. I knew this event. I had been on the committee that organized it for the last 5 years. I used to wear a gown and drink champagne here. Now, I was going to carry the tray. I walked into the service entrance. The kitchen was hot and noisy. You, the chef shouted at me. Take this tray of crab cakes. Go to the main hall. Smile. I walked out into the beautiful hall. The lights were dim. A string quartet was playing. The room was full of people I knew. There was Linda, wearing a red dress I had helped her choose. There was the banker who managed Richard's accounts. I kept my head down. Please don't see me, I prayed. Please let me be invisible. I moved through the crowd. Crab cake? Crab cake? Most people didn't even look at my face. To them, I was just a floating hand holding food. It was a strange feeling. 2 weeks ago, they laughed at my jokes. Now, I was furniture. Then, I turned a corner and bumped into a woman. Watch it, she snapped. I looked up. It was Claire. She was wearing Richard's favorite diamond necklace, the one he gave me for our 10th anniversary. She looked at my white shirt. She looked at the tray of food. Her eyes went wide. Then, a slow, cruel smile spread across her face. Well? Claire said loudly. The music seemed to stop. People turned to look. Look who it is. The lady of the manor is serving hors d'oeuvres. My face burned. I felt hot shame rising in my throat. Linda turned around. She gasped. Joan. I always said you were a gold digger, Joan, Claire laughed, taking a crab cake from my tray. But I guess the gold ran out. Finally found a job you are qualified for? The old Joan would have run away. The old Joan would have dropped the tray and cried in the bathroom. The old Joan cared too much about what people thought. I stood there holding the heavy silver tray. My arms hurt. My feet hurt. But then I looked at Claire. She was cruel. She was bitter. She was living in a house she didn't earn, wearing diamonds she didn't buy, Then I thought about the $50 I earned painting the dog with Sarah. That money was small, but it was honest. I thought about the paycheck I would get tonight. $100. My $100. I realized something powerful. There is no shame in work. There is only shame in cruelty. I straightened my back. I looked Claire in the eye. "Enjoy the crab cake, Claire," I said calmly. "I hear they are delicious." I didn't run. I walked past her. I offered food to the next guest. "Crab cake, sir?" I finished the shift. I cleared the dirty glasses. I wiped the tables. When the night ended, the manager handed me an envelope with cash. I walked out of the museum. My legs were trembling, but not from fear, from exhaustion. I walked back to the motel. I sat on the bed and put the cash on the nightstand next to the money from the paintings. I had survived the worst. I had been humiliated by my enemies, and I was still standing. The next day, I met Sarah at the park. "You look tired," Sarah said. "I am," I said, "but I have money for supplies." "Good," Sarah said, "because I have a crazy idea. There is an art contest next month. The theme is identity. The prize is $10,000. She looked at my hands. "You are better than me, Joan. You have technique. You should enter." "Me?" I laughed. "I paint dogs for pocket money." "No," Sarah said seriously. "You paint because you have to. I saw your eyes when you fixed that dog painting. You have a fire in you. Paint something real. Paint your story." Paint my story. I thought about the white villa. I thought about the invisible woman serving food. I thought about the empty timeline of my life. I took half of my catering money. I didn't buy food. I went to the art supply store. I bought a large, high-quality canvas. I bought the best oils. I set up the canvas in the tiny motel room. It took up almost the whole space. I started to paint. I painted for 3 weeks. I painted through the night. I painted until my fingers were stained blue and gold. I poured all my grief, my anger, and my newfound freedom onto that white square. I didn't paint a pretty seascape. I painted something raw. The day of the contest arrived. I had no car to transport the painting. Sarah borrowed her brother's van. We drove to the gallery. I stood in the back of the room, wearing my simple dress. The judges walked around. They looked at the landscapes, the portraits, the abstracts. Then they stopped in front of my painting. The judges stood in front of my painting for a long time. They whispered to each other. One of them, an old man with thick glasses, leaned in close to look at the brushwork. I held my breath. I felt sick. I was standing in the corner in my cheap thrift store dress, surrounded by art students and critics. The painting was called The Lease. It showed a beautiful golden bird cage. Inside the cage there was a woman. She was dressed in silk and diamonds. She looked exactly like I used to look. Perfect, elegant, and expensive. But if you looked closely, you could see that the woman's feet were chained to the floor of the cage, and the door of the cage was open. She wasn't trapped by the bars. She was trapped by fear. Outside the cage there was a storm, but there were also other birds flying free. "It's haunting," I heard a woman say. "It feels honest," another man said. The head judge walked to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "art is not just about technique, it is about truth. We saw many beautiful pictures today, but one painting told a story that broke our hearts and then put them back together." He paused. "The first prize of $10,000 goes to Joan Vance for The Lease." The room applauded. Sarah grabbed my arm and screamed, "You won! Joan, you won!" I walked to the stage. My legs were shaking, just like they did when I was kicked out of the villa. But this time, I wasn't walking away from my life. I was walking toward it. I took the check. It was just a piece of paper, like the check the lawyer gave me. But this money was different. This money didn't come with conditions. It didn't belong to a husband or a father. It was mine. I had created it out of nothing but canvas and courage. After the ceremony, a man in a gray suit approached me. "Mrs. Vance?" he said. "I am a collector. I would like to buy your painting. I offer you $15,000. $25,000 in one day. It was enough to rent a real apartment. It was enough to buy food for a year. It was enough to start over." "Sold," I smiled. "That was 3 years ago. I don't live in a villa anymore. I live in a loft in the city. It is one big room with big windows. It smells of turpentine and oil paint. The furniture is mismatched. I bought the sofa at a flea market, but I love every inch of it. I love it because my name is on the lease. Joan Vance. Not Mrs. Richard Vance. Just Joan. I work as an artist full-time. I am not rich, but I am comfortable. I pay my own bills. I drive a small used car. Last week I saw a picture in the society pages of the newspaper. It was a photo of the annual Architects Gala. There was Claire. She was wearing a stunning black dress. She looked beautiful. But she looked tired. The article said that Richard's company was having financial trouble and that the villa was back on the market. I looked at the photo and I felt nothing. No anger, no jealousy. Just a strange sense of pity. Claire was still fighting to keep the golden cage. I had already flown away. I put down the newspaper and picked up my paintbrush. I was working on a new piece. It was a self-portrait. In this painting, I am not wearing silk. I am wearing paint-stained overalls. I have wrinkles around my eyes. But I am standing on a mountain, and in my hand, I am holding a key. My name is Joan. For 45 years, I was a guest in my own life. I thought safety was money. I thought love was being taken care of. But I realized that if someone gives you everything, they can take everything away. Now, I have less, but I have everything. Because everything I have, I built. And nobody, not a lawyer, not a stepdaughter, not a bank, can ever take that away from me. If this story about resilience, self-discovery, and the true meaning of ownership inspired you, please give this video a like. Have you ever had to start over from zero? Share your journey in the comments below. For more emotional English stories about finding your strength, please be sure to follow our channel.